Football addicts, this is the episode for you. Dash, our favorite fan, elementary school football and Baltimore Ravens junkie. This is going to be a conflict for you because our guest today is a true legend of the sport, inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame as a longtime Detroit Lion, but could go in again one day as one of the greatest defensive coaches in the history of this sport. His new book, Legendary, which covers the 2008 Super Bowl winning Pittsburgh Steelers and his famed zone blitz defense, along with his 6 decades in the NFL, it's available wherever books are sold. We're very honored to welcome Coach Dick LeBeau to the 323. Coach, thank you for being here, sir.
Thanks for having me, Reid. And Baltimore fans, they don't have to look down at me, man. We respect the heck out of them, and I think they respect us. It's a great rivalry.
That's what I've always loved and appreciated about these two teams. Like I'm a Washington Commanders fan, so it's just a little bit of a beltway rivalry with Baltimore. But the class between the two organizations, the loyalty between the two organizations, and everything, like the heart, the push that your two teams would put into each game was incredible. And Coach, you've been a part of so much great NFL success. You've been around and coached so many legends of the game, coached against so many legends of the game. Your book, Legendary, it's about the 2008 Steelers. What was it about that 2008 squad? Outside of just the Super Bowl, I know y'all won the Super Bowl, but there's always something, there's something there's a spark there. What was it that was so special and inspired revisiting with such a deep dive, enlightening breakdown?
Well, in every coach's vocabulary, you'll get the phrase, a family is a team and a team is a family. And for some people, you'll hear that, but it's just lip service. And they're not going to live it in their lives and practice it in their daily existence. This group, the 2008 defense, was the most together family of men that I've ever been around. And particularly with the way that they played defense and were always so much in tune with one another. One of the salient points of being an effective defense is you cannot give up big plays. That's something I figured out a long time ago. How to do it took me longer, but this group of athletes, they led the league in fewest amount of big plays yielded for a huge amount of years, as long as we could keep them together. And the reason for that being, there just was no weak place on the defense. There was nobody you could say, well, if we can get this guy isolated, we can do this and do that. It wasn't going to happen. And yeah, sure, did they get blocked every now and then? Yeah, but you couldn't block two of them side by side, so there was never a real what you call a hole, because the other guy would always show up there. And they were particularly gifted in that ability. And there was a bond with them. James Farrior was their captain, and he was pretty proactive in getting them together. They would get together every Thursday night and do something, whatever it was. But they lived off the premises of the football facility, and they shared life together. Troy is Ryan Clark's kid's godfather. Ryan is Troy's kid's godfather. Troy's kids call Ryan Clark Uncle Ryan. Ryan's kids called Troy Uncle Troy. I mean, they were a family, and they performed together. It was like a sheet of symphonic music. And it was just pretty to watch. And our secondary could tackle. And that's another key ingredient, and not giving big plays up, because if they ever did manage to get the front seven blocked, which was very rarely, somebody in that secondary was going to get them on the ground. Usually it was a Troy or Ryan, but quite often it was a corner, Ike Taylor or Bryant McFadden or Deshae Townsend. They were all just great tacklers, and they were special. And I was a statistic guy, and I'm always kept track of what was good enough and what wasn't. Something that I could discuss with our players, could hold up a video of their performance and say this isn't good enough, and have some data behind it to base it so that they could get their teeth into where we had to get better. Or if they were doing really well, I could support that also. And this particular group, as we went through that 2008 season, they were number one in everything. And I think out of my key 11 categories, they were number one in 9 of them. I've never seen anything like it, and not since either, I might add. Teams can be pretty strong in this area, but a little lagging in another. And we had a considerable amount of categories that we took into consideration. And again, just trying to give them meaningful goals. And this group, they set a standard that I don't know that's ever going to be equal again, especially the way they play defense in the NFL today and the way they throw the ball around. But they certainly were not historic in when they were located, because 2008 is, older, longer seasons than but no one's come close to these numbers since then. So I think it's going to be pretty tough for people to get them. But that was the purpose of writing the book, so that what they did will be down in black and white print. People, Steeler fans or football fans, can go over and say, man, this must have been a pretty special group. And I didn't quit coaching until I was 80, so it took me a while to get around to writing the book. That's why it's a little later coming out.
What an incredible run, though, that you had. And I like that you brought up so many of these different players, but there's one in particular that I had to ask about, because like you said, this defense was loaded with Troy Polamalu, Ryan Clark, Willie Gay, Brian McFadden, James Harrison. Like, you could just go on and on. James Farrior is somebody that you've brought up and you point to in this book. He was the captain of that team, but how much did he truly mean to you in that squad that y'all had?
Well, he was the glue. I don't think there's any question at all. He was a little more vocal. Troy led with his deeds and his plays and his explosive reaction to plays, and his ability to come up with a perfect play in the most needed time. And Troy was not an outspoken guy at all. He was very quiet. And I've never met anyone ever who said they didn't love Troy Polamalu. That's just the kind of guy he is. But James Farrior was more or less the voice of the defense. We called the defense into him on his headset, in his helmet, and he spoke to the defense in the huddle. And he was the guy that they all heard every snap, every down, what the play was. And he was the focal point of our defense, our leader. And I think he gets the credit for being the guy that at least started the central aspect of this group of men. And if you see them today, they're just like they were still playing for the Steelers, and they're all over the country now. And if they can't get together physically, they'll hook up on a Zoomcast or whatever they call it, and they will be brothers and teammates as long as any two of them are left on the planet.
Would Troy Polamalu have been as good without the hair? Do you think the hair helped?
My favorite picture of Troy and I is a picture of us on the sideline, and Troy's looking at me, and his hair's, he didn't have his helmet on, so it's all down across his back. and Troy took on a magic marker and wrote in white across his jersey. He said, "But coach, with my hair down like this, people can't see my name. And then he wrote up in the corner with a little comic book thing down to my mouth. Troy, your hair is your name. The way Troy got his name in our locker room, we were playing Baltimore, and Baltimore had us beat. And there was about a minute and 50 seconds to go in the game, and Baltimore had a lead. And Flacco was killing the clock off. And it was a situation where we had to get the ball back, or the game was going to get eaten up and they were going to beat us. It was over in Baltimore. So it was 2nd down and 8, and they were kind of being real conservative and running. And I said, well, they probably ain't going to throw it in this situation. I said, but I'm going to send Troy around the outside just in case he can get out there and blow up a run and put him into a passing situation where we can, get off the field and get the ball back for our offense to try to win. It was a 3-point game at the time. So Flacco, he was playing well, and he was going to conservatively throw a real quick pass. And Flacco was, 6'5", maybe. He was a big, tall guy. And Troy, nobody could ever judge his quickness. He was so fast and explosive. He came around the outside of the downside, the tight end side of the formation, and Flacco wound up to throw the ball with this big, long span, and Troy reached around and swatted the ball out, and it fell on the ground. And Lamar Woodley picked it up and ran it down to the 3-yard line, and in 2 downs, the offense ran it in, and we won the game by 4 points. So the way Troy got his name for us after the game, Suggs was one of their great pass rushers. What a tremendous football player he was. And, you can imagine that the atmosphere in the Baltimore dressing room was not one of joy, losing a game like that in that tough situation. And the sports writer come over and said, what'd you think of that last play there with Troy come around? And Suggs says, I can't believe they didn't block the hair. They didn't block the hair. So I took that little clip and put it up on the blackboard, and I said, this is Troy's name from here on in. Baltimore didn't block the hair. So that's a long answer to your question, but that's the way it is. I'll tell you one more quick one about Troy then.
Please.
Myron Cope was the guy who came up with the terrible towel, the Steeler terrible towel. That's all you see at the games and everything. It was his innovation. I'm not sure the year, back in the great 70s teams, I'm thinking. But he was a icon in Pittsburgh sports. He was a sportscaster is what he was, but he was great. So after every game, he would have a coach on his show briefly in the locker room. He'd come in the locker room and he'd grab you and get you and have players and stuff and interview real quick. So he's got me, and we had a particularly great game. That's why he picked me. He was the defensive coordinator, and he's talking about this. And Myron talked like this. That was the way he talked. That was his handle on the radio. He says, Coach Bo, he called me, Bo, Polamalu's playing good football, but don't you think he would be better if he cut his hair off? Doesn't that hair have to slow him down? I'm laughing like you guys are laughing. I said, Myron, I'm not sure about that. I said, because I haven't weighed his hair lately, but I said, I think if we cut off his hair off, I don't think it would slow. We're getting too much weight off of him. Actually, I personally liked him with the long hair, because one of the few times he usually wore it tied off and wadded up, but he would blow it down for the games. And every now and then an opponent would yank on it. Technically, if you got something hanging out of your helmet that's not your helmet, it's not illegal to grab it.
Nope.
And that would aggravate Troy to no end. So I would always hope if Troy hadn't made a great play by a half a quarter, someone would yank on his hair somewhere. And then every now and then I'd say to Ryan, Ryan, sneak in there in the next pileup and yank on Troy's hair. I said, we need to get a couple plays out of him. It's apocryphal, but it's a good story.
No, that's really funny. And Coach, the kind of the undertone to a lot of your stories is that really tight-knit family kind of atmosphere that you've talked about, especially with that 2008 squad, and that players to this day being really close and tight-knit. For me, being a single father of two little girls, doing this, every chance I can, and working full-time and going back to school, it's really, I found that it's almost impossible to spread yourself to where you need to be the most. I've always heard coaches like Joe Gibbs and Jimmy Johnson describing how rigorous and obsessive coaching in the NFL can be, and kind of how that toll can take on one's personal life, to where, coaches will be sleeping in their office overnight, studying film, and to counter that, your old coworker, Bruce Arians, he recently talked about having to learn how to prioritize his family and trying to teach the importance of a balance to the coaches on his staff, both in Arizona and Tampa. Coach, how did you manage your work and personal life balance over the years? And, did you have to develop certain disciplines in order to even have a balance?
Well, I was blessed to have a great woman who was a mother to my child, and she took on the burden of raising our son pretty much, and did a wonderful job. He's 45 now, and he has a wonderful family of his own, and I was just lucky enough to have a partner in life to do that, because there's no question about it. Behind any successful man, there's a woman who's helping him and giving him the room and the time to do what he's got to do. And in particular, sometimes guys they get a little obsessed with making sure they've covered everything. I learned to trust my players to a certain extent, and I went to bed wondering if I had missed anything really salient or important, super important for the game. But I trusted my guys to pay attention in the preparation meetings, and that we would be thoroughly prepared. But just the simple nuts and bolts of getting the game plan together, studying the opponent, get the game played, grading it, evaluating, correcting, getting ready for the next week. The only real demanding part of coaching is that you can't get a machine to watch movies for you and create your game plan. You got to do that yourself. And I think it takes a special type of a wife to allow that man, a particular man, no matter what his chosen occupation is, the time necessary to do his job. And I think there is a sorority of coaches' wives, no matter what the sport is. They are pretty much sport fans themselves, usually, or they wouldn't be married to the guy, I don't think, or not for long. And I just was the beneficiary there of a good wife and a good mother.
I want to ask you about the NFL today, to a degree, if because over the last decade, right, we've seen the league start to lean a little more toward scoring and quarterback, wide receiver, stardom and dominance. And, like, I'm a defensive nerd. I came up as a football fan, playing freshman football and learning 3-4 defense, actually studying your defense and your teams. And, I'm a defensive guy, but it's like offense has become king in the league. So with that has come different rule changes. So I'm curious how much tougher it is for defensive players and coaches to adjust to some of the newer rules and changes that favor offense. Like the newest one coming up this season, making changes to eliminate the hip drop tackle. Like how would you adjust? How tough would this be for you and your players?
I never heard of the hip drop tackle until the last couple of years, incidentally. I think they created the term for a situation that existed. I always felt this way. Reid, I feel it's going to be change in any endeavor, occupation, lifetime pursuit. You're not going to exist over a period of years and have everything be the same way you started. I figured this out pretty early as a player first. What they used to let me do as a defensive corner and what they started calling me in my 8th or 9th season, they were different. And I figured out pretty quickly if I wanted to be successful, keep the guys from getting the first down, knock the ball down, or keep my guy from catching it, I was going to have to do whatever the rules were how they were calling the game particularly, or what the rule was. So I made it a very prominent part of my preparation for every season. What they do is they have these meetings and the rules committee and everything's designated, and they meet and they come up with the rules for the year. And then the officials come around to the training camps and the coaching sites, and they go over what the changes are. And they have a very well prepared library of films and types of plays and how they're going to call them. And I said, look, I'm not going to complain about what they're doing to the defense. I'm going to see what is the best situation I can get for my players, because everybody's got to play by these rules. And you have to have rules in everything in society, or you have a mob. So there are going to be rules to any competition. And I said, I'm going to figure out the best way for our guys to have the biggest advantage to be successful with what I want them to be able to do. And that's how I always approached it. I didn't spend my time walking around saying, man, what are they doing to the game, this and that. It is what it is. It's a great game. It's overtaken our society and the country as a sports advocates. It's our favorite game. So it is, the rules are what they're going to be. One thing about, I say in the book, I don't know if anyone's going to equal the statistics of this defense. Well, part of it is because they score more now, and they throw the ball around, and rules are made to be, records are made to be broken. And perhaps someone will compile a list like this in the book. That was the purpose of the book, for everyone to see what this 2008 defense did, because I don't think anybody else is going to ever do it. And it wasn't so much like when I played, and the Green Bay Packers ran the ball 67% of the time, so that was the number that everybody in the league went for. Well, now they run it 27% of the time and throw it the rest of the downs. I don't know that anybody's going to hit these numbers again, because they haven't since, and they hadn't for some time before. Actually, going back to my era, we led the league in defense. I played for the Lions in the early 60s. And the numbers that I put in this book for the 2008 Pittsburgh Steelers were about the same daggum numbers as what we gave up in 1963. So you can see it was kind of special. Well, it was purpose for the book, really.
It is a fantastic book. It's almost a Bible for the football addicts out there. You need to get this book, Legendary, available wherever books are sold. Coach, we have a good friend of the show, a Steelers junkie, Jeremiah Fletcher. He nervously says hi, but he also wanted us to ask, 2010, right? Super Bowl 45, and had Troy Polamalu been healthy that season, do you think the outcome would have been different and stacked up with this 2008 unit that's featured in Legendary?
Well, they're talking about the game that the Green Bay beat us.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember that game. First of all, they had a great quarterback who's still playing, I might add. And I knew if you get to the Super Bowl, you're going to be playing against a great quarterback. I mean, that's a given. And we had just come through in 2008, winning a last second game, which is highlighted in this book, with Roethlisberger, a great quarterback, against Warner, who's a great quarterback. And I can remember on the sideline, they had the ball, Green Bay had the ball, and they were moving the ball, and I think they had a 3-point lead. And I said, if we can just keep them to a field goal, Ben's going to come back and win this again, just like he did down in Florida against Arizona. And we did get them stopped, and they did kick the field goal. And I right up until the last second, when he didn't convert the first down to keep the ball, I thought we were going to win that game. Now, I don't remember a lot of the particulars because we wrote the book about the 08 game, which we won, naturally. But it was a one possession game. If we score on that, we win it. If they stop us, they win it. And most, not all, most Super Bowls come down to the one possession. As if you think about it, men, most NFL games come down to that. Who scores last in that fourth quarter wins the game, because the competition is so evenly matched. But in the championship games, they're really evenly matched, and both teams are accomplished or they wouldn't be there. So to answer your question directly, I didn't think we were going to lose that game up until the very last series of downs, when we lost control of the ball and Rodgers could go out there and kneel. Then I realized that we weren't going to win it. But do I wish it had been different? Yeah. I remember that Rodgers dropped the ball in over Farrier's shoulder on the most beautiful pass I've ever seen in my life. And when people make plays like that against you, sometimes it's just not your day. I do remember that in that game.
It's wildly annoying when quarterbacks are doing that against the team that you're rooting for in a game. Roethlisberger had that. Roethlisberger had that kind of reputation with me. It would annoy the hell out of me.
Excuse me for interrupting, but if you notice, gifted quarterbacks are pretty damn good at putting that ball in the place they want it.
Strangely. Yeah. I want to go back to 08 real quick and ask just how excited, because I know how excited everybody in the room was. It's one of the one of my favorite Super Bowl memories of James Harrison with the immaculate interception and that pick six. I know he was wildly out of breath. How out of breath were you celebrating with that?
I wasn't celebrating. I was tremendously thankful. If you remember, on that play, they had the ball down on about our 2-yard line. We'd led the whole first half. If they score, they were going to get the lead at halftime. And if we could hold them to a field goal, we were going to come out there at halftime with an even game. And all I was focusing in was keeping them out of the end zone. And next thing I look up, and Warner turned that pass loose, and James jumped right up in between him and the receiver and picked it off. And he took off running. And my first thought was, I've always taught anybody who's not a defensive back, if you get the ball in the end zone, kneel on it, man, because probably more bad things are going to happen to us than good if you try to run, and especially in that situation with no time left in the half. So I started, of course, there's no way he could hear me. I was about the 50-yard line, and he was at the goal line. Get on the ground, James. James, get on the ground. Well, here he come out with it. And our guys rallied, and he started blocking. Well, the time he got to me, I was down to about the 20-yard line. But then when he was coming by me, I said, run, James, run. But that, to me, is the greatest defensive play that I've ever seen in football. Of those people on the field, we had 11 defenders. One of them had the ball under his arm, and the other one was chasing an out on the other side of the field in his coverage. So that left 9 guys that were anywhere near the vicinity, and all 9 of those players got blocks. and a couple of guys got 2, and one guy got 3 in that, because James didn't. It was no short run. It would have been 100 yards straight away, but he zigzagged. I bet he ran 150 yards in that run. Yeah. It was hot, and he was not a small guy. He was a powerful man, and he was one of the most highly conditioned athletes on the field, or he would have never stepped back out in the second half to play the game. He just collapsed in the end zone, if you remember. He just laid there, but he laid there exulting mostly because he was in the end zone. Myself, I went immediately into thinking, what am I going to do at halftime? Because he only got a certain amount of time with him at halftime, and I was happy don't get me wrong, I was happy for the 6 points, because it, in the end, gave us the win. That and Ben's great drive and pass to Centennial Holmes.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Coach, you're famous, and again, the book is legendary. You read all about this famed zone blitz defense. We want to blitz you, Coach, with some quick word association questions. All right, so I'm gonna give you a little question. I just want you to give me the first player, coach, whoever that comes to your mind on these. So I'll say toughest offensive player you had to game plan against, but also could be most annoying, because I know some of these quarterbacks are just annoying with how much precision and how much genius they'll hit you with too.
Well, that was the guy I had to play against. That was my Buckeye brother, Paul Warfield. And Warfield, I've had the game figured out pretty good. I was pretty well received as a veteran NFL cornerback. And I had my own little keys and what I looked at, and the quarterback and the wide receiver and stuff angles and everything. Well, when I came up against Warfield, he was playing for the Browns then. He finished up playing for Miami. He was a fantastic wide receiver. I had a split vision thing that I would set on the quarterback, so I could read the angle of the wide receiver and the quarterback at the same time, so I could get a little jump on where the angle I had to take to intercept at the point of reception. And Warfield, what I found out real quick was, when I saw what the quarterback was doing and I went back to Paul, he was about 5 yards further away from me than he was everybody else in the league. And I said, oh, that was a great formula, and it worked for several years, but I got to throw it in the junk pile because I can't cover this guy that way. So he gave me, he extended my career, let's put it that way, because I changed my thing, and I watched Warfield wherever the hell he went.
I view most defensive players as absolute madmen. Like the ones, especially the ones I played with, crazy. Could go like full psycho if they got to get into that headspace. What was the craziest player that you ever coached?
I think not having complete control of your faculties is an asset to any defensive player. I always look for that as a coach, because the guys that I was in the huddle with when I was playing, and that's a long time ago, but I don't think it's ever going to change. I don't think you want to have too much worry about your own personal safety to be a real good defender.
It's true. Was there any in particular? James Harrison striked me as one of the wildest dudes that I've seen.
James was more like an assassin, man. He was expressionless. He had a look on his face that said, stay away from this guy if you can, man. Probably the most frenetic was Troy. I mean, he just, with that hair flying around and the way he could go from point A to point B. I don't think I've ever seen anybody before, during, or since him with that ability to just, I mean, the whole stadium would watch him, and you could tell he was going at a different speed to everybody else. And of course, the hair flying around didn't hurt anything either. But most defensive players are pretty enigmatic, I guess would be a good word for it.
Who's a defensive player today that you'd be most excited to coach?
I spend more of my time thinking about how blessed I was to have the great athletes that I coached. I don't like to start naming people, because there were so many. My first job with the Pittsburgh Steelers in the defensive backfield, I had Carnell Lake and Rod Woodson as starting 2 of the starting 4 positions. Well, these guys are once-in-a-lifetime players, and I had them both in the same second. And guess who was a pretty good defensive backfield coach? Coach LeBeau, because of those guys. And with Troy Polamalu, who, to my money, is the most exciting player that ever played, his running mate to have joined at the hip was Clark. And between Clark and Polamalu, you had the exact perfect match of safeties that gave us the best safeties in the league for about 8 or 9 years. And that's why nobody could get big plays on us, because everybody knew where they were going. And to have them both on the same team, you were asking about a current player. Well, those guys to me are all current in my mind. They played when I coached, and I'm still here. But those particular great players that I've had over the years, there's always be first in my mind. The other guy, if he's not wearing my uniform, I ain't paying much attention to him.
That's the way. Yeah.
Coach, and to counterpoint, Reid's kind of question. Now, are there any offensive players today who you would absolutely hate to have to game plan up against? Any current players?
Yeah, that's not going to change. Whatever the sport you're watching, there's going to be special guys that are a little bit better than anybody else on the planet, and it's not going to take the most trained eye to discern this, and that's why athletics are a popular pastime for us. We like to watch them. We can see wonderful athleticism and scheme plays devised and ways to defend against, no matter what the sport is we're watching. So if you just look at the statistics at the end of the year, what quarterback completed the most passes, what receiver caught the most ball. I mean, you can look at their records and they'll tell you who's a little bit better than your average great player. They're all great players. And I would respect all of them. I always felt this way when I was asked about who do you want to not play against. I respect everyone. I don't fear anybody, because if our guys take their key and play the defense, it'll hold up against them.
Absolutely. You make a good point. It's better to be prepared for everybody, not just one person, let alone at that point. Now, before I get into the last one, when you look at these great coaching rivalries, it's more like these crazy chess matches where, it's sideline against sideline and they're trying to get one up on each other. Now, are there any specific coaches in the past that you coached against that gave you the most fits out of anybody, where you always felt like, man, you guys are just having those, Muhammad Ali-esque bouts back and forth? Any coaches that you could think of off the top of your head?
I never personalized it so much. I would go back to whoever I was playing that week. I would, of course, focus on this year's games and see what they were doing. But I would go back, and if I didn't have a clear enough memory, I'd get the film library out and look at what he did when he was coaching 4 years ago and with that team. I just try to prepare myself that way. I mean, every coach that makes it to a certain level has got a certain amount of skill, or he wouldn't have the job. But again, I would say the same thing that I said about the player. If you look at the teams who are producing offensively, defensively, or whatever, they've got a good scheme, and somebody's put together a good program. Not only that, but he's sold his players on investing into putting all their energy into applying this strategy, whatever it is. Andy Reid would just He's just done it again and again and again. Now he's been blessed to get good players, but when you get a common denominator like that, and I don't like to get into names because you didn't say that, you didn't mention that guy, and they're all gifted or they wouldn't be there. But you look at the numbers, and I've been a statistics guy all my life, and particularly in professional football. They're going to tell you who's throwing it, who's catching it, who's scoring the points, who's getting the sacks, and it's going to be there for you to watch. That's there.
Absolutely. I think the NFL, these NFL coaches and players are, the cream of the crop. You wouldn't be good if you weren't there. And I think this leads into the last one before I kick it back over to Reid. Fans of the show know segments that I kind of lead here on the NFL side of the Calvin Ridley Memorial betting slip that we do every week, of doing parlays about, trying to put some of these prop bets together, or even on the college football side of College Shame Day, doing the Wheel of Degenerate and picking, winners and losers of certain games. Now, you're famed both as a Detroit Lion and a Pittsburgh Steeler. Both teams are still very competitive in today's NFL world. Now, if it came down to the Lions and Steelers in the Super Bowl in 2025, who are you rooting for?
Oh, I'd be like president at the Army-Navy game. And like parents who's got one son playing for one team and one son playing for the other. I'd go sit in one half of the stadium and go over the other half in the second half. I'd root for both of them.
We'll have to get you an NFL jersey of one side being Detroit and the other side being a Pittsburgh jersey. But there we go. Put it together. Put you right on the 50-yard line, so that way.
We got you on that. We'll put the budget aside. We can get you that, Coach. Coach, we so appreciate you being here. Again, the book is legendary. You can get it wherever books are sold. You need to get this book. I want to ask you real quick before we let you out of here. One of our biggest fans is a fifth grader, but he's a football junkie. He is a great defensive player. We're talking about Dash. Shout out to Dash. Is there any particular advice that you would give any defensive players, or just any aspiring football players, going into their careers?
Dash, listen to your coaches. Stay in condition. Don't put substances into your body. Take life at its normal speed. That's plenty fast enough. Train. Do this. If it's good for your overall conditioning, do it. Make it part of your habit. If it's not good for your overall conditioning of your body, don't do it. Don't let it inside your body. Listen to your mom and dad. Help your folks around the house. Be a good American citizen. Play by the rules. And focus on conditioning and studying in school so that you can learn all the plays and all the assignments that your coaches are going to ask you to do. And then just give it all you got. And when you get done playing that day, you can say, I played as hard as I could, did the best I could. Win or lose, get ready for the next play, the next game, son.
Love it. We love it. Thank you so much, Coach. Coach, I saw that you recite, it was said that you would regularly recite a visit from St. Nicholas by heart to the players every Christmas season. We'll obviously have you back, right, for around Christmas time to recite it to us. Get our crew hyped up.
I do it several times still, so it wouldn't be anything new.
We'll see.
We'll hopefully still be here.
Yeah, I hope. Yeah.
God willing.
God willing. If we are, yeah, please come back for Christmas. We love a Christmas visit from you, Coach. It's been so fun.
You got our connection.
Hey, we appreciate it. We appreciate it so much. Coach Dick LeBeau, again, the book is legendary. Going in on the 2008 Pittsburgh Steelers, that incredible squad that will live on forever in legacy. Get it wherever books are sold. Coach Dick LeBeau, thank you so much for being here, sir. We really appreciate you.
Thanks,
Thanks
Coach.
for having me, man. I appreciate it.